Welcome to Hope is Here. I think we all want to make a difference with our one and only lives, and today we're going to hear about another hero who provides hope, who is from Kentucky but is making a difference thousands of miles away at a young age. Our guest today is Steve Flairty. He's the author of Kentucky's Everyday Heroes. This summer, he just released the 5th volume of this series. I enjoyed number 4 and have thoroughly enjoyed the newest edition, number 5. Steve, today's hero, grew up not too far from where we are recording today, but man, his life kind of started out a little rough, didn't it?
David Lane, Greg, by all accounts, probably shouldn't even be here. He was going to be put up for to be aborted back about 25, 26 years ago, and his mother, on some trip to church, I'm not sure that she even attended regularly, whatever, was convicted to not abort her child. Some way or the other, there was another lady in Winchester by the name of Deborah Lane who had several children herself, really wanted to, for whatever reason, adopt a child. And she found out about little David's situation through some church people, I believe. She decided that she would adopt that child if at all possible. Interesting thing was that she was a nurse, and I'll give you the short end of the story. She actually delivered this child who was formerly going to be aborted, and it became the Lane family's child. So little David was born into a loving Christian home in Winchester, Kentucky.
Well, but like a lot of kids, you become teenagers and we start to experiment with things, and sometimes it doesn't work out too well for us, does it?
David was a very bright child. I talked to him today. I mean, he's just a quick learner and so forth. He also was very athletic. Was on the George Rogers Clark track teams, cross country teams. Was just a real star athlete. He also had some friends who liked to drink, and with all these positive things that David had going on in life, a good Christian home, smart, achieved well in school, great athlete, he felt like he needed to drink like his friends, and so got started drinking. It became a problem. He eventually got kicked off the track and field teams, and went on and graduated from high school, decided he wanted to go into the U.S. Army. He did well there for the most part. I mean, he was, again, very physically dynamic, was in some of the athletic kinds of training things, and did very, very well in the U.S. Army. Very competitive young man, but he couldn't get away from the bottle, and drinking became a problem. There was some issues there, and David says that the Army and him had a mutual opt out of his contract, pretty close to getting kicked out, and so David came back to Winchester. Still a loving home back there. Knew for sure that he's going to have to watch his friends. So fortunately, he got with some Christian friends in Calvary Christian Church there in Winchester. Went on a trip with them to Guatemala, and it was a mission trip. David's life changed from that experience. And you've heard so many people have an experience like this, and they can't stop talking about it, and they're so excited, and then about 3 weeks later, there's something else.
Kind of fades away, doesn't it?
Yeah. And for David, it just really worked. And he talked about having, I don't know whether he had a dream or whatever, or something he felt like God spoke to him, where he saw Jesus, he saw himself, and then he saw Guatemala. It was he felt that God was telling them that this is where you are going to be. Well, long story short, David Lane has a thriving ministry down in Guatemala today, in the poorest of the poor areas down in Santa Rosa. He started out mainly working with young children down there. And he developed sponsorships for these children, about 38, 40 of them. Help meet their needs, physical, had an ongoing kind of Sunday school class. He's a great personality and so forth. Learned the language. It takes a pretty sharp person sometimes to grasp onto a new language, and he learned that really fast. He had a whole bunch of people back in Winchester that saw his heart and started donating money. He made some connections with a rich mover and shaker down in Guatemala.
I like this guy's name, Carlos Vargas.
Yeah. And is very well known down there. Has built housing. Has done a great deal.
Well, and it speaks so highly of David that here a native guy like Carlos Vargas, saw the good work David was doing, let a guy that's an outsider and a young person. The guy's like 26 years old, and yet he believed in what he was doing.
So many people point out to me that you talk about a hero, Steve, but there were so many little heroes outside, and you take Carlos as a mentor of David. With his background, I asked David. I said, could you go back into this alcohol problem thing? He says, I've set it up, so I have a whole bunch of people to hold me accountable.
That's wise.
And so mentorship and so forth, and people down there in Guatemala who have a love for their people, who have volunteered in his ministry. And David comes back about 2 or 3 times a year back to Winchester and uses that time to talk to churches and so forth and raise money for his ministry. But he's there's a website that I mentioned in the book there.
Uplifting Ministries?
Uplifting Ministries. Yes. And you could look up David Lane Winchester on Google if you've forgotten that, whatever, to find that, which has videos and so forth and shows David in action. But he comes back. He continues to get funded by people in Winchester, and there's a church in Hopkinsville. For anything like this to work, it takes a lot of support from people.
The amazing thing, though, he's doing all this only on a $2,400 monthly budget.
Yeah.
I mean,
that's
incredible.
Yeah, he didn't get in this to get rich.
No. I was like, I had to read that twice. Like, is that $24,000? No, that's $2,400 a month. And he had a family, he told in the book, that gave him free room and board. So, I mean, this guy's not living the life. I mean, he's not. It's a bare bones budget.
He's not. And recently, he has found a long time future supporter of his ministry. I think he's met a person, I didn't mention that in the book, but he's somebody he plans to marry, I think, within the next year, who has his heart and so forth. But you take David, who was headed down the wrong path. Mm-hmm. It was just no good, and it was Christian friends who introduced him to an experience that was not about David. It was about other people, and it just invigorated his life. Now, all those talents that David has, the intelligence, the ability to learn languages, the creativity, the natural love for children that he has, and just imagine the lives down in Guatemala in this poor, crime-ridden area. And he does talk, when you talk to him a lot, he'll talk about some of the dangers there also, Greg.
Oh yeah, that's
crime-ridden and so forth. So.
Yeah, it talks about his ministry, Uplifting Ministries, in the book there, about they provide food, clothing, and schooling support for some of the neediest children in the Santa Rosa area of Guatemala. He said these children are very poor and have no parents or are a single parent. And it's just amazing $25 here, you might be able to basically get 2 meals and enough for a tip there. That could feed somebody for a week, Steve.
Yeah, and he's just very intentional. He's he sits down and he plans these things out and so forth. And in recent months, he's expanded his ministry more. Children, but also adults, okay. and he wanted me to kind of point that out. And he has alcoholics who stop by that he feeds and he tries to encourage and so forth. And David hopes someday to expand what he's been able to do here to other parts. He's game for the challenge, which kind of just, he always was one who wanted those challenges athletically and so forth, and he's using those challenges now for a greater purpose.
Yeah, I love that. Along with Adam Northworthy, a minister at his home church in Winchester, they've helped a woman in the Santa Rosa community start a small business making keychains.
Yes.
So that was kind of a cool story.
Yeah, he's very big on teaching a person to fish, you might say, the old platitude there. She made these little objects and been able to sell them and those kinds of things. And I think he would like to get into that in a greater way in the future with the encouragement of Carlos and so forth, who is definitely an entrepreneur himself. But, it's... You have to admire his perseverance. We think it's hot around central Kentucky, extremely hot there. I don't know if Dave has much air conditioning down there or not, but everybody should meet a person like David Lane.
Yeah, he's a difference maker. He's, like you said, has a vision that he said in the chapter you wrote on him. He said, I'd like to have the ministry self-sustainable in the next 10 years. Then maybe I could move to Southeast Africa, Asia, or Africa and start the same way I did in Guatemala. And I love that he's got a vision for where he wants to go. And they always say the sign of a good servant leader is what happens after they leave. And
absolutely.
So he's stopped that out already.
Yeah. And so David Lane has made Winchester, Kentucky proud. He's shown that you start off bad doesn't mean you have to end off bad.
Absolutely. That's a great encouragement to some parents listening. You've got a teenager, maybe he's a little bit rebellious. And
yes.
He went through that. I mean, when you get asked to leave the Army, you're in pretty bad behaviors. But I love how you closed out David's chapter. David said, I rely on 1 Thessalonians chapter 5:16 to be cheerful and give thanks. He said, I know it's where God wants me to be. So if you're interested in supporting this young man, David Lane, out of Winchester, Kentucky, I want to give you the email. We'll also have this posted on the podcast later. If you're driving, you're like, oh, man, I can't write this down. He's got an email there. It's simply UpliftingChildren.guat. That's G-U-A-T for Guatemala. UpliftingChildren.guat, G-U-A-T, @gmail.com. And so we'll also post that with the information on our podcast. You can find that at hopeishere.today. That's hopeishere.today. So you'll be able to find that information on there if you want to contact him and see how you become a financial partner, or maybe you want to put a team together and go do a mission trip there with him. Well, stay with us. Steve's going to be with us for one more program sharing about another hero from his newest book, Volume 5 of Kentucky's Everyday Heroes. I'm Greg Horn, and this is Hope is Here.
CMI is your full-service human resources provider in Central Kentucky. For 15 years, CMI Human Resources has taken great pride in helping organizations and people work. Whether it's employee handbooks or help in filling a position, no job is too large or too small for CMI. Contact the professionals today at CMI Human Resources, 859-296-2800, or online at cmiconsulting.com.